a little obnoxious. But Dr. Charlie Mize, welcome to the show, my friend. Thank you so much for blocking a little time here
Yeah,
to come
pleasure's
on and
mine,
chat
man.
with me.
Pleasure's mine.
So let's start here for the people listening, because like you have a really cool job and background. So I think it'd be awesome if we kind of hit what it is that you do, and then we can transition and chat more training talk.
Sure. So my background. So I initially trained I'm a doctor, obviously, and I trained in emergency medicine and resuscitation. Um, for many years, I was the founder and lead for the Himalayan Kingdom of Bhutan's pre-hospital critical care helicopter rescue service and their mountain rescue service, which involved flying small helicopters into incredibly high altitudes and pulling broken people off of mountains, and then going into villages and stuff, and like remote hospitals, and take people who are critically ill or injured and then try and resuscitate them and then bring them back to ICUs in the capital. So that was what I did for several years. And then I worked a little bit in Switzerland while doing similar stuff, while coming back here to the United States and working, doing resuscitation and general emergency medicine at Yale. And then I was recruited to join the International Committee of the Red Cross to work doing basically trauma and battlefield resuscitation work, and also pre-hospital, like the same sort of thing I did in Bhutan, like pre-hospital evacuations and retrievals. So that's that's my current gig. Yeah, and so it's a really lovely job because it's really exciting, but also it's a very nice marriage of like clinical medicine and all the thought that goes with that, but also the vigor of working out in the field and challenging terrain, uncontrolled circumstances that requires a lot more than just being good with being intelligent. It requires you to be like fit, athletic, and so on. So yeah, that's my
Yeah, because
background.
there's a very serious physical demand that comes with what you do, right? Like if you're being flown up into the mountains at high altitude and you've got to go get somebody who is severely injured, you're probably already wearing a pack, and then you've got to figure out a way to pick up and carry this human potentially to get like there's a huge physical culture and physical nature and physical demand with
Yeah,
your job.
yeah. Now, like my I did the mountain rescue stuff for about 3 years, and I'm looking forward to doing more of some of those operations in the future. I don't know how high altitude my future operations will be, but when I was doing that work, that's basically what prompted me to start working with you, with like all you guys at Rebel, because the demands on your body are just so incredible. You imagine, even if my apartment in Thimphu, which is the capital, was at 7,000 feet. But if you to fly to 16,000 feet, get off a helicopter at 16,000 feet, carrying, 20 pounds of equipment on your back, and then another like 5, 6 pounds, like on a shoulder strap. And then you have to go with just you and one other person, grab, actually manhandle a person who can't bear weight on their own over rough terrain. Um, it is, it is extremely difficult. And you have to do that in a way that, you're also able to like perform mental tasks. And so
Hmm.
if you redline physically, then it destroys, at least for me, it destroys my ability to like focus on cognitive tasks. Like a little bit of sacrifice of that is acceptable. We plan for it. We draw up our meds in advance. We plan in advance. We do all these things to make sure that we do as much cognitive offloading as possible before we get on scene. But you never know exactly what you're going to get till you get there, and what sort of condition the person's going to be in, what sort of terrain the person's going to be in, how it's going to be. So, yeah. So physical fitness turns out to be not just like a nice thing. It turns out to be an essential part of the work.
Yeah, it's a total necessity for you, right? Like I train, most of the people listening to this, most of the people at Rebel Performance, we train because we're meatheads that love to throw down and lift weights and have a good time in the gym. Like we want to challenge ourselves physically. We want to see what we're capable of,
Mm,
blah, 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 blah. I know you're a very similar way, but
absolutely.
in your profession, there's an actual consequence to your physicality not holding up to the standard, right?
For
Like
sure.
if I walk in the gym and have a bad day, I have a bad day. It's like you show up for work and have a bad day, and other people suffer.
Yeah, and like in my early days, I definitely was not. I was not fit enough. Not fit in the right ways. You know. So I'm really fortunate because my best friend is my brother. My brother is brilliant. He is an incredibly talented athlete, but more than just being a talented athlete, he's a very intelligent athlete. And so, my habit had always been to just ping things off him. Like I've always been a very, very dedicated athlete myself, but like my brother was always training to be like an all-around physically dominant athlete. He trained, for strength, for muscular endurance, for like aerobic capacity, for anaerobic capacity. He trained like all like various sets of systems. Um, I rode lightweight crew at Division 1 in college and was fortunate to be on a national championship team. And then I raced after college in triathlon. And so that got me into all these terrible bad habits of basically chasing the thrill of these crushing workouts without allowing myself like proper recovery, proper programming, attention to my biomechanics. And so basically when I arrived at the mountain rescue work, I was overconfident because I had tremendous aerobic capacity. Here I was like 36, able to run a 450, 445 mile. But I was incredibly weak. Like I weighed 145 pounds at just under 6'1". Um, I'd never really lifted weights, a little bit in college as part of our training for crew, but like really had never seriously done any sort of lifting, never done any serious training in my shoulder girdle. And so it's amazing how just adding weight and altitude just transforms something that you imagine to be just aerobic capacity work into just murder, just total murder. And so I really, really struggled. And I was like, alarm, like danger, Will Robinson. And so, um, you know, uh, like it just caught me off guard because I thought of myself as being in really good shape, but I was not in good shape. I was like over specialized for one thing and it wasn't doing me any good.
Mm-hmm.
So my brother, who also trains with you guys, and had for some time, was like, "Hey, you should hook up with my coach." And so it's just been a huge difference. I tried lifting on my own for probably 6 months, and had gotten uh, I had really had tremendous success in injuring myself, which I was, it was like I was like really proud of how successfully I approached that problem. I was like, okay, I'm gonna just crush it literally. Um, nothing severe, but like my progress tapered off. I saw some initial progress as you'd expect, like the first few weeks, and then boom, kind of tapered off, and that was that. Um, yeah,
Yeah, I
so
mean,
it's absolutely essential. Yeah,
yeah. So I was gonna say I can just intersect here a little bit because I remember when we first connected because Joe put us together. This is probably over 2 years, 2 years ish now.
yeah, a little more.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah, and like I can remember like our first chat talking to you. One, just being blown away like how cool I thought your job was. Two, like we totally jammed on science and physiology stuff with
absolutely.
like that being your background and that being my background. But yeah, like I can remember kind of that first conversation, onboarding, looking at the assessment, all the different things we look at when we take on new clients, and being like, okay, like Charlie's got an engine for days, right? But the primary frustration that you talked about in that initial phone call was I had this aerobic capacity, but that's not the thing that's limiting me. Like I need more strength, I need more muscle mass, and I need a way of accomplishing that without hurting myself, like back, shoulder, hip type stuff. Is that
Right.
kind of like the correct framework,
Mm-hmm.
like where you
Mm-hmm.
were when you were coming in the door?
Exactly. Like my connective tissue was just this wholly unprepared for this sort of
Hmm.
work. So those are the frustrations. It was like not, you know, I mean, and I looked terrible too. There's also that.
So so let's kind of actually talk about what we did
Sure.
working
Yeah.
together, right? Because I think there are
Yeah.
going to be a lot of people listening who can relate to this idea of being a one trick pony. Like maybe you're a one trick pony in terms of endurance. Maybe you're a one trick pony and like I'm only strong, or maybe you're the one trick
Mm,
pony and I'm only jacked. Whatever it is, right?
mm, mm-hmm.
And then we see a lot of people that come in the door with this kind of back, hip, shoulder pain, like not broken per se, right? But
No,
if
not
you
broken, but
if you
like,
train and push hard for a while, like you eventually run into some issues, right? So let's actually talk about the plan, the framework we put into place for you, and like what kind of your big takeaways were from that. If you think about like what you were doing versus how we approached your training, and then but yeah, so I would love to dive in and talk about the actual framework, the plan that we put in place for you, and maybe juxtapose that with what you were doing versus what we
mhm.
had you doing. Like, what were the actual actions, and then what were some of the results that we got from putting those things into place for you?
So the first thing that you guys did was to very carefully look at my movement, look at like how I like everything from the my like scapulohumeral rhythm, how I carried my shoulders, my pelvic tilts, like my mobility and my spinal mobility in different planes, all these things. Which because I had just been like working aggressively on my aerobic capacity had not really gotten a lot of attention. Um, and then from there, um, the programming was very intentional and progressive. And the immediate thing was like dialing back the amount of aerobic work, programming in like rest. And I don't mean just like sitting on your back doing nothing, but
Thoughtful days of
thoughtful
rest.
thoughtful days of rest where you might actually be working, but like the work is I would have like 5 working days initially, and then maybe or like 4 working days, and then 2 days of work that was like aerobic work, or like you know just almost like physiotherapy type retraining, like movement re-education for my shoulder and my hips and so on. And that would just like, and it was just through present day, just a continual plan of gradually improving those mechanics. Um, and then right off the gate, like really thoughtful. We started with like low, like using the classic lifts, like squat, deadlift, bench press at like low weights, because that's all I could handle, and a lot of accessory work to help prepare me and prevent me from getting injured. And so, some real challenges those first 6 months because I had already hurt myself and I was not like, my mechanics were really poor. But it's amazing how um, that corrected over the course of that first year. We basically corrected all of those issues while, simultaneously dealing with the challenge of me changing positions and traveling a great deal, between back and forth between Europe and the United States, and having like varied types of gym access and access to different types of training equipment, all these other extraneous. Despite that, programming was consistently adaptable and consistently challenging in a way that really provoked me to grow. Um, I had not, like, we all talk about periodization, but I think when you're doing your own programming, and it's like if you enjoy something, you talk yourself into believing like, oh, I'm totally mixing it up this month, and you're not. And so you'd be like, oh, I know you really like this. We'll come back to it. We'll come back to it. We're gonna come back to it like several months from now. And
Hmm.
so, forcing me to have new physical challenges. That was all. It was extraordinary. And where I ended up about a year and a half later was like 18 pounds of muscle gained. Like, my aerobic capacity is not as good as it used to be, but it's not that far off the mark. It's like
Still really good.
it's still, yeah. Like I don't. Um, it's like quickly retrainable. Like if I were to like just step on the track and run a mile, I would probably run it like in the high fives. Um, and that's just not being the focus of our training right now. But if like so, just an example, like this, a lot of people who are like meatheads are going to think this is pathetic, but like the most I'd ever deadlifted was like 130 pounds.
Hmm.
18 months, saw about 18 pounds of muscle uh, gain. I was super, my body fat percentage was super lean. It hasn't really changed
Hmm.
effectively. My, like I could do like 230, 240 deadlift for 15. And remember my like one rep max was like around 135.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a nice,
So
that's
like,
a casual 100 pound plus 15 rep jump.
I mean, like, yeah, like my bench press, my max bench press was probably around 130, similar. Um, I have no idea what it is now, but I was repping, close to 160 for 15, you know.
Hmm.
Um, like pull-ups, I could do like two pull-ups. I can now crank out probably close to 20.
Yeah.
It's just profound. It's just profound how much stronger I am. And another thing, which there's no real way to measure this, but there's a skill in mountaineering that is really underappreciated, and that is the ability to stand on one leg. Okay, to transition. Like if you want to ascend quickly, it's amazing how having excellent balance, being able to like move almost like a bird, like you jump from one leg to the next. If you can do that and have great control and great balance, it's amazing in my humble opinion, how much faster and efficient you can be.
Hmm.
So my one-legged balance is just continue. It's something that we focus on, that I you and I decided to train, but like the difference. Like I had trouble lowering myself down to the ground on one leg, and now I can pistol squat like comfortably, like one, two, three, four, like 10 reps left, switch, 10 reps, pistol
Hmm.
squat left, right, no problem. And that translates so well into all sorts of, like that. So that's another huge improvement. So, and I don't look as ghoulish too. It's kind of nice.
Phil, I mean, that's what 20
Yeah.
pounds, 20 pounds of muscle will do for you. It helps out a little bit.
Yeah, I'm still lean. I would love to be like
Yeah, because
175,
you're what, about
but
one?
we're 165
Yeah.
now, 163. Yeah, so 175 of like pure rock solid muscle would be like that would be the
Hmm.
goal. But like, I understand like getting there is going to take, a little more time.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just about consistency, which you're the king of. And so, one of the things I want to interject with here that's really important because we have conversations on the podcast. This gets floated a lot on the internet as well. People talk about like creating these movement based changes, right? And
Mm,
one of the things that's super important is that it requires a very integrated approach. Like I get
hmm
really frustrated when I see people who are like, "Hey, I have shoulder pain, or I have back pain, or I have knee pain, or I have hip pain," and they are in this mindset of like, "Oh, can you just give me 3 to 5 exercises that I'm going to do, and it's going to make it magically get better?" And it's like it
Yeah.
doesn't work that way. Like it needs to all be plugged into a comprehensive, integrated plan, right? But you're a perfect example of
hmm
the fact that hey, we can get you these movement based changes so that you feel better than ever before. But while we're doing that, like we're also getting you a training effect. Like, we're not here just to lay around on the ground and teach you to move better. We're here to move better, to feel good, but then to also like smash all your other
Perform.
performance goals, right? Because like that's where the art takes place. Because I think there are a lot of people who are really good at one or the other, and I think like subjectively, where we're really good as bringing those two worlds together.
Right
I think
on.
like that's where we excel, and I think you're a perfect example of that. And for people listening, I will say, right, like you're literally the perfect client because you execute like a champ. You do absolutely everything to the T, and so like that helps tremendously, especially when we have a remote relationship, because like if you can't show up and execute and follow instructions, then nothing's going to get better. Which
Yes, that's
which you are
true.
very good at. So pretty
It does make a difference. Yeah.
yes. So pretty fantastic outcomes and results. I'm curious what's
Well,
go ahead.
my brother. I mean, like, I have to give some credit to my brother. My
Hmm.
it's kind of like this
Your brother's the
hilarious
same
like
way, like both
Alcoholics
of you.
Anonymous. Like, yeah, like I couldn't imagine not showing up for training because you know, even in the last few years, I've been like, ever since I left Bhutan, and I've been doing a variety of things, in anticipation of starting this new work with ICRC. My, I've spent quite a bit of time like staying with my brother or being around my brother or just like when I'm traveling, talking with my brother. And he is so inspirational in that he is just like a clock when it comes to his training. So it's like can't miss a day. Plus, I mean, I know we're talking about like my movements, but like, oh my goodness, like the amount of like, the increase in his deadlift, he's trying to crush, Virginia State powerlifting championship records. So it's like
He
very
will
different
too.
training
Like
goals,
it
but
will happen.
yeah, very different training goals. But like, it's easier to be consistent when like you have a whole family culture of physical excellence and dedication to your
Hmm.
health. And so it makes it really easy because, like I said, my best friend, like, like every day, it's like a nice little reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of those powers of community and culture as well. Like if you're surrounded by people, and I said this on another podcast, they kind of function like gravity in a sense. Because like you can't help but
Mm,
be pulled towards them. You can't help but be pulled in that direction. Like that's one of the reasons we
right.
harp on the community and the competition aspect of what we do at Rebel, because we know how powerful that is. And
Mm,
just like
absolutely.
it's that whole you're going to be the average of the five people you spend the most time with concept.
That's
Like if you're
right.
surrounded
Yeah.
by people who are constantly improving, constantly getting better, constantly pushing you, like you're just going to get grabbed by the throat and pulled along almost whether you want to or not. Right? And that's the best part.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I definitely love the community aspect of all the work you guys do, to be sure. To be sure. It's just kind of hilarious that my brother, who's such a big fan of yours, is the one who brought me into
Hmm.
like the Rebel programming crew. Um, yeah, I feel like I'm probably like the smallest, least strong member of the entire Rebel clan,
But that's where it's
but
important.
I'm working on it.
It's important to appreciate what the outcome goal is, right? Because I always talk about attribute bars, right? You have strength, hypertrophy, power,
Hmm.
endurance, movement would essentially be the core five. Like I want to give you all of those. But if you think of them like dimmer switches, every person based off of their goals, what they're trying to achieve, like we got to be able to move the dimmer switches up and down a little bit. I don't want any of the dimmer switches off, right? But
Right.
you're the perfect example of an athlete where it's like we're playing this constant trade off of I can't have the capacity, the endurance come down too far. So it's that balance of like how high can I push strength and hypertrophy without the endurance falling beneath some critical threshold, et cetera, right? And we're
Mm-hmm.
always trying to find that
Mm-hmm.
balance for people depending on what it is they need, what their goals are. Like Joe, your brother, we can afford to push strength and hypertrophy far higher because we can afford for his endurance to fall a little bit lower. Granted, like your brother still has a huge engine, right?
He does. He's
Yeah.
ridiculous. He's so talented.
Yeah. And so it's that constant
Yeah.
balancing act of figuring out what adaptations do we want, what stresses do we need to impose, when do we impose them, and we're just constantly figuring out how we want to move these things around.
Yeah, absolutely. It's also, I mean, as a plug for you guys, it's not that, a person with like a great deal of study can't come up with, a basic plan, but, like expertise is really important. Like as someone who has spent years of his life studying and learning and continues to study and learn, to be expert in a handful of physiologic topics, like I recognize that there are real limits to how good your program can be when you're doing it yourself. And that's assuming that you're an expert in it. And if you're not an expert in it, then those limitations are even more real. So there's a saying in medicine that a physician who treats himself has a fool for a patient. You know, you
I like
know?
that. That's good.
Because you're gonna make mistakes when you treat yourself. You're going it's like one of those things where you are just going to be blinded by your own, you know, by your own your willful hope that things are not as bad, or your hope that they're worse than they are, or whatever it
Hmm.
is. You're colored,
You have too many
right?
biases for
Um,
yourself. You can't
you
be,
have
it's
too many
like the
biases.
objectiveness is not there like it should be.
There's none. It's like the definition of subjective,
Hmm.
right? It is like the opposite. Like what's subjective? It's like trying to look out. And so like looking in is like that is what subjective is, Like ergo cognitum, ergo sum. Like you are definitely looking in. So um I for sure was like, I'm getting plenty of rest. No, I was not. Like I am definitely cycling through different programming goals. I was definitely not, you know? Like I understand, like I'm a gentleman who has dissected 5 human cadavers and has a very, I think compared to an average client, coaching client, has a pretty good understanding of musculoskeletal anatomy and biomechanics. And I roasted, toasted, holy ghosted myself,
Yeah.
you know? So there's really no comparison. Like I like the improvements, the injury rate, the recovery from past injuries, all these things, tremendous, tremendous.
Excellent, man. I love to hear it. Were there any like other big lessons or takeaways that you kind of found over the last 2 years of working together that you think would be beneficial for people listening?
Yeah, I think there is one thing I would like to say, I think, along those lines. There's this old North African expression which is like God laughs while man plans. And it's the notion that, like I've always found in my life that making life decisions in 2 steps is always fraught with peril, but one step, you're always allowed one step. And as pertains to training, I think one of the most important things about having working with you guys is how you are not just, it's not like here's this program, because like the first 6 weeks, you start a new program, it works. Even if it's like just like the shock to your body system, doing something new, it works. But then, you know, like problems arise, life happens, things change. And so what's really wonderful is that I might have a training goal. My life circumstances changes, my body adapts much faster in this domain and it adapts more slowly in another domain. Like turns out that my mobility came back really, really quickly, but my strength that lagged a little bit. And so, making a plan for yourself that lasts 6 months, uh, like that, you know, that's kind of like a recipe for not getting the best out of yourself. And so what I really have loved working with you guys was this constant checking in, like at the like gently at the end of every week, more prominently at the end of every training cycle, to ensure that the goals haven't changed, the target hasn't changed, and that and that we're like we need to adapt the stimulus to achieve the outcome we want. You know, like when I was doing my own training, like definitely did not like I might give a lot of thought and consideration into writing my own plan, for example, but then I wouldn't check in with myself. And I found that a lot of these prefabricated plans, like when I was training, doing my own lifting, I worked with some of like some just templated stuff. And, that's the problem. It's when suddenly when your body adapts in a way that's not just across the board cookie
Hmm.
cutter, but your body adapts in like sort of a uncommon measured way, which I think is actually how most of us adapt given our own physiologic histories. But having someone kind of deal with that, hugely important.
Yeah, you kind of, it's just a law of diminishing returns, right? And part of that feedback process, the communication with the athlete is so important. And just looking at their numbers and what's happening week by week is like, I want to see what this curve is doing because within any phase, within any block of training, we have some outcome, some adaptation that we're chasing, right? And we want to be cognizant, aware of like, when are we starting? Like, when is that plateau coming? When is my line rounding out and hitting a ceiling? Right? Because as it's rounding out and hitting a ceiling, now I know, okay, we need to change. Something has to change. Some stimulus adaptation needs to take place, right? And I think to your original quote, it falls very much in line with the Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face,
Yes, exactly. That quote is
right?
great.
Because that's the thing that a
That's
lot of people
great.
run into is like they sit down, they get a templated program, the first few weeks go great, but then week 6, 7, 8, they start running into issues of like, I'm not making progress anymore, or things are starting to hurt. And it's like, that's the point in time where a coach is so valuable because that's where the coach is like, perfect, cool, we're going to go do this. Right. And so it's just like a little stair step effect. Like we just keep stair
Mm.
stepping our way up over time. And then a year goes by and you're like, holy hell, like I just don't even recognize the person I'm looking at in the mirror anymore.
Let me tell you, like maybe parting thought. Let me tell you a physical challenge I had that I could not have conquered, but for your coaching. So um, I went back to do 6 weeks of work in the mountains in the Eastern Himalaya after we've been training for like maybe 14, 15 months. We had a call to a guy who fell and broke both bones in his lower leg, the yak herder,
Hmm.
at like 16,500 feet, snowy terrain. And he was also like a savage alcoholic, and so he decided the thing to do, you know, it was to like basically get slammed on cheap rum up there or cheap whiskey. And he then developed like hemorrhagic gastritis. So he's broken his leg. He's like vomiting blood, and he can't walk.
This is a
And
great situation
it's
to be in.
snowing. It was snowy. Now he wasn't a large guy, thankfully. He was probably only about 120 pounds. He's kind of short. Um, so we go to get this guy, and the train is so rocky that we can't land close to him. We have to we land probably about 75 meters away from him, and we're downhill from where he is. Okay, so it's just like light snow on the ground. We like clamber. It was not like a climb. It was like a hike, but you had to use your hands on a few occasions, and we climb up to where this guy is uh, quickly, right? And already the difference, like before, like I'm not like it was hard, but I'm not like torn up and destroyed. Then we rope this guy. We create a little like double bowline, and we rope both this guy's arms, and we basically do like a drag,
Hmm.
through the snow. Thank goodness it was snow. We just basically dragged this guy. Like one of us basically like lifting up on his legs a little bit to like reduce the total amount of weight, and me, pulling him, the 75 meters towards the aircraft. This is after we like get him on the side, put an IV in him, give him some medicines, like give him some anesthetic, so he's like a little more chill, like this, and then we drag him. And I was thinking to myself, like, here I am at like just over 16,000 feet, right? And I'm doing basically a sled
In the
drag
snow.
of a guy who weighs, in the snow, a guy who weighs 100, around 120 pounds, carrying 20 pounds of weight, Like, there's no way I could have done that pre-James. There is no way. I would not have, there was no way. Now, was my heart rate extremely high when I got, yes. Was that like an incredible, yes, it was very, very hard. But like, I was like patting myself on the back. I was like, look at me now,
Crushing it.
crushing
Crushing
it.
it.
Yeah. So like, cheers to you, gentlemen. I hope my new work with the Red Cross puts me in similar circumstances. I don't know if it will, but if it will, then I know that you guys will, work with me to be ready to meet any of those challenges. So
Beautiful. Dr. Charlie, thank you so much, man. I'm so glad you got to come on.
thank you,
Thank you for
James.
being an amazing,
Pleasure.
fantastic client, a friend. Hopefully, we can actually get out and hit a backpacking trip of our own soon.
Oh, hell
Would
yeah,
love
we
it. You
will.
and
That'd be
Joe, we could
great.
go out and tear it up someplace. It'd be amazing.
It'd
But
be
thank you
beautiful.
so much, my man.
All right. Until soon. Ciao.